Damien Cooley, welcome back to Property Insights. Hey, mate, last time we talked was just sort of the start of the drama. We started getting a few interest rate rises and all that sort of stuff, and no one knew really what was going to go on, what was going to happen. Everybody got pretty nervous. Here we are, 5 rate rises. We're at September 2022, maybe more rate rises down the track. Where do you think we are?
I've been saying for quite a while that I feel like anyone who's been selling a house, trying to sell a house, get on the market as soon as you possibly can. Try and beat the influx of property that hits the market in spring, late spring. What that means for buyers is that I think there will be better buying late spring. Basic supply and demand says that if you are putting your property on the market when there's a lot of other property on the market, it's going to be harder to sell.
And is that what you're seeing, though? There's lots of property on the market?
And there's not a lot of property on the market right now, but there's more coming.
Right.
We've seen, Mark, remember that we've been through probably the biggest real estate boom that the country's ever seen. We've gone from having auction clearance rates, 80 to 90%, to right now in September, for the first couple of weeks, we're running at 51%. I do think it's heading towards more of a buyer's market. I do think, however, that if you have a quality home, it will sell well. And that's because there is a flight to quality.
But what does that mean, quality?
Well,
what do you mean exactly by that? Because does that mean a house that doesn't need to be renovated?
Well, that's an interesting point. And there's two parts to this, right? First part of it is you can still have a crappy house, but it's in a great street, faces the right way, and it's a real investment opportunity to come in and add value to it. So that's a quality home. However, a quality home is also a home that ticks all the boxes that may well be finished and renovated beautifully. When I say there's a flight to quality right now, what that means is that the buyers that are in the market are all being quite picky about what they'd like to buy. So they're discounting properties that don't fit their criteria, and those properties being heavily discounted in the market. There is also big concerns around construction costs. So for a buyer that's thinking about renovating a home, they're going into it a little bit eyes wide shut because they actually don't know what it's going to cost to complete that renovation. Sometimes there's better value in buying a property that's already finished.
So what's different, given that scenario today, what's different, say, from 12 months ago? Would buyers just go and buy anything and didn't care?
Yeah,
we'll sort it out.
There was a big fear of missing out on the property market. Because prices were running away from buyers. Now there's not so much a fear of missing out, but a fear of paying too much. And if a buyer fears paying too much, they're a lot more inclined to sit on their hands, not be the first person to bid at an auction, happy to let that one go because there might be another one coming in a few months' time. And to be frank, I agree with them.
So what are the agents? You're an auctioneer and a well-known auctioneer, and you do lots of auctions for lots of different agents across the board. What are the agents saying to you? What's their general feeling about stock in the market, vendors' appetite to sell no matter what, distressed sales? What's going on out there? What are you hearing?
There's not a lot of distressed sales right now. It's possible that they are coming. I feel like the mood in the market right now is that agents are very, very much inclined to convince their owners to take a price. I think that you'd be naive to think that the market was going to be getting better in the next few months. The market will deteriorate and it will get worse. It will get harder. And I think that for those vendors that are on the market and thinking about coming on the market, there is an element they actually know that. And they're being told that by agents. So if you're a vendor that's thinking of selling or are on the market right now, the agents are convincing them to take a deal and to do a deal.
Right. So, okay, let's just flip this a little bit. So people engage you because vendors engage you and or agents on their behalf engage you because they know Damien's going to drag every last cent out of the buyer.
Yep.
I'm a buyer. Let's say I'm a buyer. What have I got to be careful of what Damien might do to me? Like, what am I got to looking out for? Like, and you're a representative of a lot of other auctioneers too. What are the sort of tricks that I got to be looking out for so I don't pay too much? Because no one wants to pay too much. Okay?
Yeah.
Especially in this market. I don't want to pay too much. You're right. There's a fear of paying too much. You feel like an idiot. You're like, I'm the dope who paid too much. No one wants to be that person. What am I got to be careful of when Damien's, let's say we're at 1.8, there's no other buyers in the room and I'm the highest bidder, but I'm 1.8 is not going to buy it. What am I got to be careful of?
Manipulate's probably the wrong word. I use my skill to my advantage to get the best result for the owner. I make no apology for that. It's all about negotiation. So to give you an example, if I'm calling an auction and I ask for an opening bid, the number that I ask for will be determined by who's registered, how many people are registered, what the owner wants, and what I think a buyer will pay, or what the agent thinks the buyer will pay. I quite like being the third person in this transaction and having no emotional involvement in the sale, because I'll look at the sale really logically. And I say to myself, okay, owner wants that, the agent thinks the buyer wants to pay that. I might have one registered bidder. I will ask for a number that I know might be challenging for the buyer. I know it might be too much for the buyer. I'm not really looking if they'll respond quickly with a bid. I'm looking at their emotional reaction to the number.
Looking at their face?
Yeah. I'm looking at the emotional reaction to the number that I say. Because as a human, when somebody asks for something, your face gives away a lot.
Can you give me an example? Let's say the owner is looking for $2 million.
Yep.
That's the reserve.
Yep.
The buyer talk with the agent during the inspections is 1.8.
Yep.
Give me an example. What do you mean by what you just said?
Buyer talk with the agent might be around 1.8. The agent might think the buyer might not even be at 1.8. They might be less. The owner might sell for 1.9, even though the reserve is 2 million. So in that instance, what I would be asking for from the buyer, I've only got one registered bidder.
Yep.
There's no point in me asking for 1.7 because I've got too much of a gap to try and get to 1.9 or 2 million. So I'm going to be saying, look, there's been recent sales in and around the $2 million mark. There was a sale down the road at $2,050,000. I think we should be able to see an opening bid at, say, 1.95.
Right.
Now, I know 1.95 is too much, but I'm asking for 1.95 because the facial expression on the buyer will give me direct indication on whether they think 1.95 is too much. And if their facial expression is negative, I'll then drop that number back and I say, look, even something around 1.8 might be more appropriate. And I'll see their facial expression change.
Yeah.
So I know that they're starting to feel more comfortable around that number.
Right.
Now, I usually would say that number because I'm about to lead in with using a vendor's bid. So I strategically ask for a number. I judge the buyer's facial expression, if there's only one, and then I might have a vendor bid up my sleeve, and that vendor bid might be 1.8. Now,
can I just get you to explain a little bit? So,
Yep.
So you look at my reaction. My reaction at 1.8 is like maybe I'm there,
Yep.
Or I'll give you a different reaction at 1.8 to what I gave you at 1.95.
Yep.
A bit more positive.
Yep.
And you got a vendor's bid, meaning what? The vendor's allowed to make a bid?
Yep, vendor's allowed to have one bid at an auction.
Do you have to declare that?
I do. Yep.
You have to say
I have to declare it.
There's a vendor's
Yep.
bid. Okay.
You got to declare it.
So I don't understand, why would a vendor bid?
Because
they're not going to buy their own property.
No, they're not. But this is a strategy. So as an auctioneer, buyers feel more comfortable when they start hearing bids.
Right.
They start hearing numbers. When an auctioneer, we use things called trial closes. A trial close might be first, second, third, because the buyer's reaction after you get to third is like, it's going to sell,
Yeah.
even though it's not on the market or it's not, the vendor's had a bid. So I ask for the number, I look for the reaction. My vendor bid previously might have been 1.8 before the auction started.
Yep.
In my mind, I might make a decision to go 1.850 based on the buyer's emotional reaction. So I might vendor bid 1.850. As soon as I vendor bid 1.850, I do things as an auctioneer to extract a bid out of a buyer. I don't wait for a buyer to make a decision on when they're going to bid. I go after them. I go after the bid. Two things that I would do in that instance. Firstly, I would call it first, second, third.
To the vendor's bid?
To the vendor's bid.
Yep.
A second thing that I might do is that somebody who's working with me might be standing, say, 2 meters away from me, and they might be holding my hammer, my auctioneer's gavel. I might make, this is another tool of urgency that I do. I will walk over to them. I will grab the hammer. I'll come back and I'll say, John, our instructions are the same. Yes, they are. It's reserve still 2 million. Vendor bids at 1.850. And I'll then call it 3 times. And what that does is that it signifies to the buyer that there is a change in mood. Something's happening here. Is he going to sell it? Even though it's still the vendor's bid. But that's a strategy that I use to try and extract a bid out of a buyer.
What normally happens? So what are these
Sometimes
buyers
they
do?
bid, sometimes they don't.
Right.
And that's the reality. Like,
What would you say a buyer should do? What would you do if you were the buyer? And Damien was sort of putting that one on you.
It's funny. People say to me, you know, when's a good time to buy? Should I bid at an auction? Should I not? And I always say to people, if you like the house, buy it.
Yeah, but I get scared going. I mean, the auctions are scary, dude. Like,
they're scary, but that's because a lot of people are, I guess, you know, some people have never been to an auction before, so they're inexperienced on what happens. You know, I do around 2,000 auctions a year, so I know what goes on, and I understand the psychology of vendors and agents and buyers agents. Like I do things differently when I got a buyer's agent bidding than I do when I got Joe Bloggs bidding. Different vendors react in different ways. I had an auction on Saturday. We had a reserve of 1,150,000. We had a buyer. We're about to withdraw the auction because no one was turning up. We weren't expecting anyone to register. A bloke walks in at 129. I say to him, would you like to register, sir? And he said, yeah, I'll register. Nearly fell over when he said I wanted to register because we weren't expecting anybody. He registered. Vendor said, I want 1,150. I'd probably do a deal at 1,1. And I call for an opening bid. I say, we should be able to see a start at 1,1. This guy goes, I'll pay $1 million. I'll offer $1 million. I said, no, it's not enough. You know, we really should be starting it at 1,1. I said, look, I'll meet you at $1,050,000 if you'd be happy to open the bidding at 1,050. He says, yes. I'm thinking, this is just happening too easily. He agreed to $1,050,000. I then placed a vendor's bid at 1.1, right? Knowing that the owner may well even take that. But I placed a vendor bid at 1.1 because I thought I've got nothing to lose. He then offered $10,000 after that. I said, 1,110,000. Yeah. I said, no, can't take 10. It's got to be 50. It's got to be 1,150. He said, I'll give you 25. I said, no, it's 1,150,000.
It's always up to you, though.
It's up to me.
You don't have to accept a bid.
I'm going to accept the bid, but I'm just
But you don't
testing.
have to, though.
I don't have to.
Yeah.
But I'm testing the buyer to see if he'll agree to what I'm asking for. So I'm having a live negotiation. The long story short is he agreed to pay 1,150,000 and we called it 3 times. We spoke with the owner and we got the property sold. Now, that took like 4 or 5 minutes to sell. A few minutes before the auction, that property was going to be open for inspection the following Saturday because there was no one interested in buying it. But that's the value proposition. That's what I enjoy.
Young people go to auctions. They sit there and they see an older person bidding on behalf of maybe their kid or somebody's dad or whatever, or someone just going to buy it. You know, maybe I'm standing in the corner, I'm a bidder. What would you say to a young person when they're confronted with that sort of situation?
The old bank of mum and dad. I see it all the time. Mum, dad, partners, they jump in, they help their kids to try and buy property. The thing is that everyone has a limit, Mark. Yeah, everyone has a limit. You've just got to find out what that limit is. So as a young person going to an auction, firstly, I strongly recommend having someone help you if you feel like you need help. If you're a confident person, you feel like you can make the decision yourself, I also think that's great. Be confident in the way that you bid. Don't be put off or afraid by seeing someone who's necessarily older or said to be more experienced than you bidding. But also don't be naive. Don't be naive and think that you know everything and you know how this works, because whilst everyone has a limit, I believe that if I go to an auction and somebody has the same limit as me, I will outbid them. And that's just because I understand of what strategy to try and put in place to bid against someone where we might have the same limit. Ultimately, if someone's got more money than you, mate, they're going to buy the place.
Totally.
Full stop.
Yeah. So really don't feel nervous, because you can only bid to what your limit is anyway.
And as a young buyer, embrace going to auction. Like, embrace it. A lot of people get nervous about auctions, but it's actually the best way to buy real estate. You can see who you're competing against.
Yep.
There's no valuation risk. You understand the property that you're trying to buy. If you want to bid, bid. If you don't want to bid, don't bid. It's pretty straightforward.
And there's just one final thing. Bidding at auction, there's no cooling off period, is there?
In New South Wales, there is no cooling off period.
Which means what? Which
means that when the hammer comes down, the property is sold to you as a buyer, and you're actually legally bound to sign that contract. In fact, if you don't sign that contract, the auctioneer is legally bound to write your name on the contract and sign it themselves.
Wow.
To bind you. So it is a legally binding deal. A cooling off period in New South Wales is usually 5 days. So what that means is that if you're a buyer and it's for sale at a price and you say, I'll offer this, and the agent says yes, and you sign a contract, you have a 5-day cooling off period to change your mind. And if you change your mind within those 5 business days, you will only be penalised 0.25% of the price.
So yeah? That'll come out of your deposit.
Correct. So in an auction, you pay a 10% deposit. Most cases these days, 5% is negotiated. But if you pay a 10% deposit, you are bound by that whole amount. You pay the 10%. If you change your mind and don't end up settling, and if the owner ends up selling that property for $100,000 less, the owner can sue you for the difference and advertising costs and everything of the resale.
Wow. Would you say, like, if someone's a buyer and they don't feel confident about this, would you say that they should get a buyer's agent? Because you're saying buyer's agents are probably a little bit more cluey as to what Damien might be up to.
Absolutely.
So would you suggest to a buyer, to get the best deal, not just because you're nervous, but to get the best deal,
yes,
that they should get a buyer's agent to go to the auction?
I think that they should. I absolutely. Having a professional person bid for you at an auction is absolutely, I would encourage that for a buyer. I don't encourage that for a buyer if I'm being the auctioneer, because I know that it's going to be harder. However, I will say this. I also think you have to be mindful of what buyer's agent you get. And the reason I say that is because the buyer's agent is remunerated when you buy. Yeah. Now,
therefore, he's encouraged to get you to buy at a price.
Right. And I also think that, you need to, like, I even heard of a situation just yesterday of a buyer's agent talking with a buyer and trying to negotiate a deal. And I was thinking to myself, why would you be pressuring this buyer to do this deal when there's strata issues? They've got to get a strata report. There's a $100,000 special levy. Do not pressure your buyer to be making this decision to buy. There is a vested interest in a deal coming together there, and I didn't like it.
There's that old saying, there's in every race there's that old horse called self-interest. and sometimes these guys are whipping the shit out of self-interest. Come on, baby, bring me home. So that's very interesting. So so a buyer's agent, you think the right buyer's agent at least, who has your best interest at heart. And as long as you've got your eyes wide open, you know that you have to pay this agent on a sale, or on a purchase, I should say, would be better off representing you at an auction. If you're nervous and you're not experienced and you don't know what the hell is going on. The
industry, the buyer's agents industry is a growing industry. It's doing very well. Buyer's agents are doing very well. I'm a little bit nervous about, there's a lot of kids getting involved in becoming a buyer's agent, and people are spending a lot of money. And there's a lot of kids involved in the real estate industry too, but they're relying on these people's advice to give them quality advice on how to buy property and save them money. Choose the right buyer's agent.
Just out of interest, is a buyer's agent, are they like qualified the same way as
a vendor's got to have a buyer's agent's license.
Is it a different license?
It is a different license, yes.
Right. Yeah. But they have to go through a course and
all of that sort of stuff.
So the real estate institute, or whatever it is, manages it all.
I guess it's like anything, Mark. You can't beat experience.
Yeah.
And it's hard to teach experience. I thought when I first got into auctioneering, I thought I knew everything. And I look back on that now and I thought, mate, you knew nothing.
Well, it's funny. It's like everything. The more you know, the more you really you don't know too.
Right.
But when you don't know much at all, you think you know everything.
Correct.
Because there's only a small pool. So you think, I know everything in that pool. As you get more experience, the pool gets bigger and bigger. And you say, shit, I know a lot less than I ever thought. So if I were sort of, 3/4 of the way through the calendar year 2022, when do you think that all this uncertainty will start to resolve itself? Well, not resolve itself, but level out, normalise.
I reckon we've got all next year to go.
The 2023.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's hard to pinpoint like when things will get better or stabilise. Or look, there's a lot of people feeling like the market's already stabilising. I don't believe that's the case. I believe it will deteriorate, but that's only my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I think that when people realise the cost of all these interest rate rises in their back pocket, I think there's been a huge amount of money that's been pumped into the economy that we're kind of feels like we're living off the coattails of all that investment that's been thrown into
Still.
There's talk about, you'd know a lot better than me, but there's talk about, potentially interest rates coming back and whatnot, but it's all chatter. It's all noise. The market's driven by confidence. There's confidence for good quality property right now. There's not a lot of confidence for everyday run-of-the-mill stuff. And when we're seeing clearance rates around 50% mark, which 50 to 60 is actually a more normal market. We spoke about this last time. But to me, it just feels like it's moving more towards buyers having the upper hand.
So do you mind if I just unpick a little bit of that for a minute? So what do you... Maybe I should be a bit more specific question. Is it because you're worried that the interest rate changes that we've had to date haven't actually hit us in the back pocket? Is that the reason you're starting to think we won't normalise for a long time, at least 6 to 12 months? We won't normalise for that period because people haven't really yet felt the effect of the interest rate rises and what future rate rises we might be also in for.
I think that there is an element of that, yes. I also think that that people are a bit nervous because the market's grown so much. And remember that we're having this conversation based on the fact that people bought properties 3-4 years ago, and some of them have doubled in value.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're talking about the market coming back. We're not talking about the market tanking.
Yeah.
We're talking about the market coming back another, potentially 5, even 10% maybe, possibly. I'm not talking about the market really coming back 30%, something crazy like that. I think that people are attracted to the type of home that they want to buy. I also feel like there's no point trying to pick the market. Me as a buyer right now, I'm separating from my wife. Once that happens, I'm going to be in the market to buy. And when I'm in the market to buy, I'm not looking for whether the market's good today or better in 6 months' time. If the right house comes up that I want to buy for me and for my family's future and it's important to me, I'm going to buy that house.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pick whether the market's going up or whether it's going down. I just want to buy the house that I want. If I'm an investor, then I'm being considerate about where my investment dollar is going to go. Now, I'll talk about that for a sec because rents are rising.
Yeah.
More people are moving back into the rental market. Our borders are opening up. We're going to have more people coming to the country. There is an element of the conversation to say that, hey, the market actually might improve and it might get better. And this is the reason why, because more people are coming. Even though rates are going up, they were ridiculously low when the market was booming. And that's one of the reasons why the market boomed. People could borrow more money. There was confidence. There was a shitload of stimulus put into the economy and there was money everywhere. I'm doing a lot of charity auctions right now, heaps of charity auctions. Every charity auction I'm doing is making more money than they were previously.
Really?
It's really interesting. Yep. I did the Children's Cancer Institute on Saturday night. We raised over $1.7 million. Previously, I think our best was about 1.314. Almost every charity auction I'm doing right now, they're making more money. That means that big business and corporates and high net wealth families are donating more. There must be more money around, right?
Well, there was more money pumped into the system, therefore there must be money around. So what most people don't get is when the government throws money at a system, and we're talking about 250 billion plus was thrown at the system, like that's a lot of dough. It ends up in our pockets somehow.
Yep.
Or some of our pockets, not everybody's pockets obviously, but it does make its way into our accounts. And it either goes down to pay your mortgage or it just gets put into a savings account. And then, so therefore it has to be spent. But it's not evenly distributed. That's the problem. It's not evenly distributed. Is your experience, I'll just close off now, is your experience that, I mean, you auction $1 million houses,
yep,
and you auction $5 million houses. Is there any disparity between the two in terms of the activity around the really expensive stuff and the less expensive stuff?
Top end of the market's still doing well.
Yep.
Not doing as well as it was in some cases. In some cases doing better, which I know sounds a bit odd, but there's a lot of buyers around for incredibly high valued properties. More buyers than there previously has been. The buyer pool around that sort of, I reckon, $7 to $15 million mark for a really good quality home in the eastern suburbs or the North Shore is still doing very well. I feel like the inner west market is a little bit more challenged.
Yeah, Inner West.
Inner West, like I'm even going to say Balmain, Birchgrove, like the Peninsula.
Right.
And I'm going to say, right through to like Newtown and obviously going out to Leichhardt and beyond, Strathfield, Concord.
Haberfield, those
all those areas. I feel like that's more challenged.
Is that because
market.
they did particularly well? Because some of those places just were ridiculously crazy.
Big prices. Yeah, I feel like that market's. I feel like that Inner West market's being hit a bit harder.
And what about if you go? Do you auction out further like Cherrybrook and those sorts of areas?
Yeah. Look, those markets are actually doing okay.
Yeah.
We are seeing some good sales out there. They're not doing as well as they were. Be clear on that. Like we've had quite a few even land releases that, in the boom of the market, we were getting 10, 15, 20 registered bidders for each one. Lots of buyers. And recently we had a land release in a suburb that just escapes me at the moment. But one of my auctioneers that all 15 properties got withdrawn.
Wow.
Because the valuer puts a valuation on the property and the values are just nowhere near that value anymore. There's a lot of, I think one thing that people don't understand right now is valuation risk, a buyer.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that you might agree to a price with an agent, but I think that valuers are really sitting on the fence right now.
They're nervous.
They're nervous. So they don't want to put a decent value on that property, and a buyer buys that property, maybe their finance approval doesn't come through based on that valuation. I think there's valuation risk. That's what I love about auctions too, because there's no valuation risk at an auction. Because the valuer should value the property or what the price was paid at the auction, because
obviously.
That's fair and market open competition.
Yeah, totally. Willing buyer, willing seller.
Correct.
On the day. That is the strongest indicator of value that there is.
Yep.
Irrespective of whether someone thinks it's overs. Well, as usual, Damien, it's been, for me, it's a fascinating discussion. I love it. And it's going to be really interesting. Strap yourself in because it's going to be really interesting 6 months, I think. I expect more interest rate rises between here and the end of the year. My gut feeling is the Reserve Bank will take a pause and just see how much damage they've done come February. And my gut feeling is I agree with you. I think the lag period between the interest rate rises is probably 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
And we won't really see the net effect in people's hip pockets until February next year.
Yep.
At which point the shit will hit the fan. That's my view. But now I spoke to Tommy Panos. I know he's a mate of yours, and John McGrath. They're sort of saying they think we're at 6 o'clock. In other words, halfway through this drama. I reckon we're probably more, we're 20 past. Yeah, we've just gone past the quarter past. Yeah, we're not even at six yet. I think there's a bit more blood to flow in the streets. Unfortunately, of course, these things are always going to hit the people who can't afford it the most. So that's the way interest rates work. It's bad news, but we'll have a correction. Everybody's probably made money over the last 5 years anyway, in terms of, the value of the house. We're all going to get clipped a bit on the way back. But as you and I know, we've been around long enough. When this kicks off again, it'll go far beyond where we started in February this year. It'll go far beyond that number, because property in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, the metros, and in the regionals, Adelaide as well, Perth, Hobart, our population growth is going to demand higher prices over time.
Yep.
And so hang in there. Don't get too frightened about with what's happening tomorrow or next week. If you're in a position to hang on. Stay with it. Damien Cooley, good to see you, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.